everybody. I'm Carlton Smith. I'm a member of the NSBP Steering Council, and I'm glad that everybody is here for the first Innovate seminar of the year. Today's going to be on PER, physics education research, and I guess I want to foremost thank our panelists we have here, but also everybody at KITP, including Lisa and Alina, and everybody at NSVP, Dr. Garfield, Dr. Garfield, Ms. Harris, who've been behind the scenes to make sure everything for advertising has been going good. But now I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Knaub to introduce our panelists and to get everything started.
Great, thank you, Carlton, and thank you for NSBP for hosting and KITP for hosting this for us. We're really excited for this to be our second event for the Physics Education Research Technical Session in NSBP. I'm one of the co-leads for this section. So firstly, to get started, we have two awesome speakers today. One is Justin Gambrell and one is Simone Hyater-Adams. I will read Justin's bio first, and then Simone will speak after Justin gives his talk. And if you have questions, please use the Q&A. That'll make it easier because sometimes the chat gets kind of nuts with questions. In any case, so Justin Gambrell is currently a fixed-term assistant professor at Michigan State University. He got his bachelor's in physics from MSU in 2018 and his Ph.D. in physics, specializing in physics education research, or PER, at Drexel University in 2024. His research involves exploring computational thinking and how it intersects with physics learning. And so I hope you all are giving him a nice welcome today.
Thank you for that nice introduction, Alexis. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so glad that you could make it today. I'm happy to be here. I do want to say off the bat that I apologize because I am getting over a sickness, so I might have to stop to either catch my breath or cough or sneeze or whatever. So I apologize about that. But yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experience with PER and my journey through it. I'll start with, I'm going to have a small little picture on each slide. It really doesn't have anything to do with PER, but it's just a little picture of some animal in my life. In this case, the dog I'm holding is my dog, Koa, and that's my sister next to me holding her cat, Moose. Anyway, so I went to Michigan State University and switched into the physics major with the intent of teaching physics. And right off the bat, well, not right off the bat, but shortly after switching to physics, I was talking with my advisor, and they were saying it's good to get into research. It'll sort of open my doors for my future career. So it was at that point I had first found out about physics education research. I started working with Dr. Vashti Sautel, and she gave me opportunities to do research and to present this research at conferences. And the sort of first research PER experience that I had was looking at how different textbooks described energy. I'd look through a chemistry book, biology book, physics book, and see how they differed. In my last year at Michigan State, I worked with Dr. Marcos Caballero, and I analyzed data from a national survey to physics departments about computation, how these departments use computation, stuff like that. At this point, I was also going to AAPT/PERC, and AAPT is the American Association of Physics Teachers, and PERC is Physics Education Research Conference. This is a summer conference where physics teachers and PER people will show up and share about the research that they're doing. It was at this conference where I met Dr. Eric Rue, who was my advisor for my graduate studies. I then moved to Philadelphia to Drexel for graduate school in PER. I had almost complete agency in choosing my doctoral project. Something very, I think, interesting about PER is you can kind of work on whatever you want. It also depends on your advisor, but you have a lot of options that you can work on. And so I wasn't necessarily constrained to work on or do like an extension of a project my advisor was working on. So that was pretty nice. At Drexel, there weren't any classes specifically for physics education research. I was taking classes like quantum and E&M and all this stuff, but there weren't any classes specifically for PER, which disappointed me a little bit because I was hoping to expand my knowledge base there. But this might be not unique to Drexel, but it's just Drexel didn't offer any classes. Something else interesting to PER is that depending on the research we're doing, we might have to, in my case, handle human subjects research and go through the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board. Because if I'm interviewing people and asking their thoughts on learning goals, I have to get this research approved so that way I'm not causing any harm to them. Anytime you do research with humans, you have to do this. Something else is I switched going from AAPT to the APS April meeting, and APS is the American Physical Society. What else? So the work that I did as a graduate student and worked towards my doctorate was on computation in physics. When I came to Drexel, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do research on, but I knew that I wanted to explore something with computation and physics. So to that end, my advisor recommended that I do a literature review and see what the state of the field was. And upon doing that, I figured out that there was sort of a lack of assessments of computation in physics. And so that's what my research worked towards. I proposed a study of assessment and development, which involved 3 different sort of phases. First phase was interviewing physicists about learning goals in a computationally integrated physics class, and in particular an introductory physics class. After that, it was designing this computational thinking assessment, making the question items and editing them, refining them. And after that, it was piloting this assessment at different institutions and then collecting that data, analyzing it to validate it and make sure it's reliable. After that, I mean, this is very recent as well. I defended August 5th, 2024. It's been about a month and a half since then. And then I started at Michigan State August 16th as a fixed-term assistant professor. I have teaching and research responsibilities. However, the majority of my responsibilities are in teaching. I'm also no longer in the physics department. I am in the computational mathematics, science, and engineering department, and I'm a part of the computation education research lab now, rather than PER. So still doing education research, but now focused on computation education rather than physics education. Something else I wanted to talk about is what else is in PER. I talked a little bit about my experience, but What else is there in PER? This plot comes from Tor Oden et al.'s thematic analysis of 18 years of PER research from a particular conference, PERC. And it looks at, it essentially found out using Leighton-Dirichlet allocation, which is looking through the words that appeared in these abstracts in the text, and determined the prevalence of words that were commonly used. And so they found 10 different sort of categories of PER research that were showing up. Representations, problem solving, assessment, quantum difficulties, community and identity. And this is a really interesting, I think, piece to bring up, because we can see how things have changed throughout the years. And this only goes to 2018, or I think 2017. But it's still interesting. Like, for example, community and identity was very low in the beginning, but by 2017, it had the highest cumulative prevalence. Something else, quantum difficulties, started out very low, and it's right around here, but we saw an increase there. And overall, for all of them, they've increased in prevalence overall. And what else is in PER? I just thought I would put some examples of colleagues that I know of their work through colleagues. Screen shares in the way. But self-efficacy and identity of community college students as they transition to four-year universities. Using social network analysis to explore connections among physics students in various contexts. Using machine learning techniques on qualitative data and comparing it to the hand-coded version. Exploring peer recognition and what the factors are those. And yeah, I'm happy to talk more about all of this, but I want to stick to my time. Here's my email if you want to reach out to me. But yeah, looking forward to answering any questions going forward.
Justin, we do have one question already. So if you have specific questions about anything Justin mentioned or his work, please feel free to ask him now. We'll then pivot to Simone's talk and do a similar thing, and then we'll have a nice lively discussion, I hope, between Justin and Simone. Anyway, what somebody had asked, are there ways to get around having to do IRB and PER?
Yeah, so not every research project is going to involve IRB. For example, you could do some work involving curriculum development. If you're looking at the curricular materials for a class on quantum, you could look at how, I don't know, how you might change things or specific topics. And it's because that doesn't involve any humans, collecting any data from humans, you wouldn't need to use or to go through IRB. I'm sure there are plenty of other things, but that's just something that came to the top of my head.
Great, thanks. And how did you find the IRB process to be? Was it helpful?
The IRB process, I think, is helpful. It's very interesting because before, when I was an undergraduate in PER, I didn't really think about human subjects research. But when I had to sort of come up with my own work and then get approval through human subjects research and IRB, I had to think about how my research might affect people. What are the things that I'm saying or asking for that might potentially be harmful to them? So it's just something I hadn't thought about before, and I think it's great to think about. And in general, the process of IRB, I think for PER is easier than say someone doing research on like a new medicine, because that has more like physical implications than mental or emotional.
Great, thank you. And this will be our last question before we pivot to Simone. This person says, thank you, Dr. Gambrill. Can you explain what kind of research is being done in quantum difficulties? And this person also would like to know where can you find they can find the graph that you show with all the different topics that are going on in PER.
Yeah. So first, what I'll do is I will share the link to that paper that has that plot in the chat. I'll do that very shortly. And in terms of recent research on quantum difficulties, I don't really know anything off the top of my head. I know that there's some people who look at what topic of quantum is introduced first and how that might affect learning, like introducing spins first versus waves first. But again, I don't know as much about that as maybe I should. But I'll be sure to put that link for you in the chat.
Thank you, Justin. And I wanted to say that I think the Physical Review Journal for PER is having a special collection on quantum. I don't know what's going to be in it. So it's likely there's not a lot of work being done that's really publicized yet because the focus collections are to sort of highlight those things. Any case, thank you so much. And again, we'll have more time to learn more from Justin in the next soon. But now we are going on to Simone. Simone Hyater-Adams is a physicist, artist, educator, and researcher with a passion for supporting Black and Brown STEM students in finding creative ways to combine her passions for both science and art. Her physics education scholarship focuses on understanding the ways physicists of color and LGBTQIA plus physicists identify with the physics community. Additionally, she runs a STEM and arts education consulting firm that works with universities and nonprofits on research projects and educational programming at the intersection of STEM and art. And Simone, take it away.
So Alexis, hearing that out loud is like, whoa. You did your best with that wordy bio, but hopefully it gets a little more clear. I'm sharing screen. There's some slides, but I'm going to talk to you a bit today about who I am and how I got to where I'm at today. So this talk I usually call is Finding Your Full Self in Physics. I think that's been a lot of my journey through physics and through PER. So as you heard, who am I? I'm an artist, I'm a scientist, I'm an educator, I'm a researcher. I'm also from the Philadelphia area, South Jersey originally, and I live here again now. Between the time that I was growing up here and now, I've been in many, many places, including Virginia, Colorado. I spent a lot of time traveling for conferences. I lived in Maryland and New York for some time, so we're going to talk about it. So my path in physics kind of started the way a lot of people's did, with just kind of interest in physical sciences in K through 12 and maybe taking physics classes in high school, which is what I did. I got really excited about physics after being really, really like very intent on going into the performance arts. I was going to be like a theater major or something. So my mom was really shocked to hear that I wanted to switch to physics, but I was really, really excited by my high school physics classes and felt like physics came easy to me. And maybe that is something others here can relate to. So I went to an HBCU for my undergrad. I went to Hampton University. Shout out if anyone knows who Hampton is. There are some Hampton folks here. My time at Hampton was like crucial for me. It's how I learned about research. I started doing research like my first year, which is something very special, I think, that many HBCUs really can do is, they got me in once they saw I had an interest. I did all types of research. I started off in like atmospheric science. And then I shifted to doing laser spectroscopy work. And then I was able to actually do summer research opportunities through a program, a bridge program, at NASA Langley, which was close by to Hampton University. And that's where I learned about PER, more in depth, I should say. So I had my advisor who was doing the laser spectroscopy research, is the one who's like, hey, if you are kind of interested in education, but you don't want to be like fully a high school teacher, which is what I would tell him all the time, there's this thing called PER. And like he just like kind of mentioned the name. He didn't really even know like much about the field. But that was enough, that was really helpful for me. It's kind of set me on my path. So I ended up deciding to go to graduate school and do PER in graduate school before I even applied. So I knew I was going to do this and started looking for places to go. I was using that NASA, I was working at NASA while I was in undergrad. So I was using that good old email to reach out to folks to get into maybe some conversations or potential advisors. And that was really helpful because that's how I found my graduate advisor. At CU Boulder. I went there for a non-traditional, even for physics and physics education research program. Basically at CU Boulder, they had a graduate program where if you were interested in combining like two fields that like do not talk to each other and you have an interest in project to combine these fields, apply here and we can help you navigate that. And I'd never seen a program like this before, but I know there are other ones out there. And so I went there rather than like a traditional PER program that I also got into, so that I could figure out how to put together my love for the performance arts with my love for physics and science. And what that became was like a graduate dissertation focused on identity. And so in physics education research, there are folks who study what's called physics identity. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but physics identity is kind of it's kind of straightforward. It's about, if you identify as a physicist and what contributes to that, what supports contribute to you feeling like you are a physicist. And I was interested specifically in Black folks and how we identify as physicists. And I feel like for me, like a part of my identity as a scientist is linked to my identity as an artist. And there's ways in which doing both has really informed who I am in both spaces. And so I was really interested in the links identity-wise around Black folks, Black culture, and our access to physics and how we identify with physics and as physicists. And so that's kind of really high level of my dissertation. It ended up being like a framework. I met a framework for studying identity. And then it ended up being a program because I always loved outreach. It's what really excited me a lot in undergrad. And so I ended up creating a program that used performance arts to teach different physics concepts, sound, motion, and force concepts. And so I went from that programmatic area, I went into that programmatic area after I graduated. So I got my PhD. Instead of going on a traditional postdoc path, I decided to go into APS, American Physical Society, and work for their programs department. And I stayed there for a little while, got another job that felt even more aligned with what I wanted at STEM from Dance. And, the consulting is kind of little projects you pick up on the side. When you become a PhD and you have research out there, people often are reaching out to ask you about that and potentially to work with you, whether you're in a postdoc position or not, is what I learned. And so I was often able to be tapped through my networks for other kind of side projects, which is what led me to where I am today. But, in between time, I had, make money. So I was working for STEM from Dance, which is another nonprofit similar to APS. But their whole program is just creating coding and, well, they're going outside of coding now, but it was all kind of STEM through dance specifically. And dance was my primary art at a time when I was in grad school. So a lot of what they were doing was super familiar for me. And so I ended up working for them for a few years too. And like kind of my life circumstances happened and my mom got sick and I ended up having to take care of her and I ended up leaving this organization. But it was there that I realized that I had been bringing in a significant amount in these kind of side consulting projects. And it made me think that maybe I should try and start doing the consulting life so I could just have more flexibility and kind of build the project I'm specifically interested in that I want to spend my time on. So I'll tell you a little bit in detail, my art. Like I said, I was a dancer. Those bottom left pictures are all from me in grad school, being in a shows. For dance, I just started crocheting like last summer. Not that great, but this was a pair of shorts I started. This images, the other images are around my music. One is like my little artsy headshot, and one is me when I'm learning the guitar, which is one of the things I've been doing. And my science has spanned a lot of stuff, as you can see. That's one of the crystals I made in the top right. A lot of presenting when you're doing research at conferences, as Justin talked about. My flight suit photo at NASA is the coolest photo I've ever taken. I cannot fly a plane. It looks like I can. I cannot. While I was at NASA, I was able to help out with other stuff like putting off weather balloons and things. So it was really cool. But in addition to all of this, I've been teaching and advising. So in my program, of course, we're learning about these concepts. I was an instructor in that as well. I taught in grad school as a TA, and I was able to actually teach as an instructor for a course all on my own while I was in grad school. And I also was able to advise a lot of students, and I've mentored many, many students, which is also really passionate. I'm really passionate about mentorship and supporting other students. This is a video that I'm not going to play right now, but it is of one of the dances my students made in the program I created in grad school. We can come back to that if you all are super interested. But I think, okay, we're going to go to my academic work around identity and then informal education. If you have questions about that, please ask me more. And I'm going to wrap it up because I think I am at time. But I just want to thank you all for being here, and thank NSVP and Alexis for inviting me to come chat with you all today. I'm excited to hear what questions you have. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Great, thank you so much. If folks have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A. My question for you is, where do you see your research going next with identity?
So right now I'm working with Texas State using the framework I developed in grad school. It's called the Critical Physics Identity Framework to analyze some interviews that they have been analyzing in different ways. And now they're interested in this framework, what it can bring out. So the framework that I published about as a grad student pulls from the science identity and physics identity frameworks from others in the field. And so there's some really agreed upon constructs from older frameworks that we say, okay, contributes or makes up an identity. That's recognition from yourself, from others, competence, and your belief to understand and performance. Tasks, so your belief in yourself to actually do the things, and then like your general interest. And so these particular constructs were coding interviews to understand them. And so their project is different than mine because they're focused on multiply marginalized people, and when they say that, they mean like specifically race, gender, and sexuality. And so we're looking at folks who are at the, either women and, identify as a racial or gender minority specifically, and interested in what ways in which those folks construct their identities and what supports them. And so it's similar to my past work, but it is definitely, but we are definitely moving forward. And I'm always interested in the ways in which marginalized folks are being physicists and kind of pushing the boundaries of what that means. And so I think that work will continue to happen in that area. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And so we have some questions that we hope to get too. So we have two very similar questions. People are really excited that you've managed to do physics, dance, make music, do all sorts of other awesome stuff. How have you managed to balance those things? What challenges have you faced doing so?
Oh yeah. Oh, so okay, yeah, that's a great question. So it has been a kind of ebb and flow, I think, throughout time. Because I'm interested in so many things and I have like an aversion to just sticking to one thing. I'm like, I want to try it all. I just have to, you can only do so much at a time. So I'd say like when it comes to my art, when I was an undergrad, I kind of dove really, really heavy in all the research and I could feel my spirit down. And so what I ended up doing was taking theater classes, like my senior year. I I was either going to do a math minor, which probably would have helped me if I wanted to go the traditional path, or I was going to say I'm not going to do that and stay an extra semester to finish it. Instead, I'm going to just fill up my schedule with theater classes. And I chose the opposite, which, like I said, there's a give and take. So I don't know if I want to recommend that to everyone, but it's what I did, and it really fed my soul and made me realize how much I needed to find a way to put both of these things into my life for grad school, which I think was critical for me in succeeding. In grad school, I had gone into this other program because I knew that if I went into the physics departments at places, I wouldn't have time in my schedule to be as flexible and probably wouldn't be able to do as much. So I made that it was a scary choice and honestly was a pivotal moment for my own physics identity. Because not going into a physics program after already deciding to not do like hard physics, right? Because I was going the education route. Um, that I was already feeling like I wasn't really a physicist anymore. And I think this is kind of shapes my work, right? It's like, no, but I was feeling like that. And so I went that path to have the flexibility. So I was taking dance classes. I took a whole semester off of physics stuff at one point in grad school because I was so stressed because I was taking first year classes, teaching several classes, and running an outreach program as a part of my RA. And so it was just way too many things, right? And so I ended up just taking one dance class that I think saved my life, honestly, and like rejuvenated me. And it was the main reason why I stayed in grad school, this one semester where all I took was this dance class. And so I think dance really and yoga and that movement happened. And when I graduated, I felt like, music is the thing that really was my first ever love in art. And I never allowed myself to have the confidence to pursue it. And so when I was done with school, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I guess I'm just floating out here, figuring it out, and decided to really orient myself to be doing exactly what I wanted to do. And I was able to get a job that allowed me to have time. I happened to be in a place where I have family who was interested in the same thing. So I found my community. And that's really the big thing, find your interest, find your community, know what it takes for you to do something and set yourself up for that. And that's what I've been able to really take on and do because because I think I've been privileged enough to have like some time and places and ways to slow down and not have to make all my money right now in order to live, right? And so I think that is how I've been able to manage it. And I could definitely give a lot more advice if you have specific ways you're looking to get more into the arts or sciences in your life. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Yeah, and we have one last question before we go to the panel section where you get to discuss with Justin all sorts of things.
Nice.
But our last question will be, what are your thoughts about the positive and negative impacts of physics identity on the mental health of BIPOC and LGBT plus scientists?
It's another great question. So I think there was me. Sorry, I think the question went away. I was trying to reread it. So the positive and negative impacts of physics identity. I think there's ways in which people use physics identity to maybe create indicators or measures of success I think that's been a really popular use of physics identity, and it's kind of the one that I stay away from the most, mostly because I I've learned in the work that I've done and through my personal experiences that, you know, a lot of what, what we're calling physics identity is so very different for so many people that trying to put on markers of success could be harmful, if not done correctly or even unintentionally. And so I think that, exploring identity and um, understanding the different supports that might be available is a lot more positive, a lot more helpful than trying to use it more quantitatively as like a scale of success. And so that's kind of my own opinion around the positive and negative impacts. But I think if you're talking about just in general, like culturally, physics has like these identities and ways of being, and I think the assimilation or not of that is just an actual barrier that people who are marginalized have to face. And so I think that whole reason why I'm studying identity is trying to find ways for us culturally as a group to expand what that definition actually is, so it's less of a barrier. So I think that is the big positive impact that at least the studies that I do, I'm trying to have. And I'm sorry if I got offline. I didn't really get that question. Is there somewhere I can see the questions?
You could see, I think you basically got to it. There's a section when I dismissed the questions just for order. If you look at the Q&A that says answered. But if you're cool with it, I'd like to start with the panel stuff because I'm curious to hear what some of your thoughts and Justin's thoughts are and how they sort of sync up and don't. So the first question, and then I have a few questions prepared, and then we're happy to have more panel discussion too. So my first question is, where is it? That's because you two have been in the field for a fair amount of time, what are some of the major shifts in physics education research you've seen?
I guess I'll say something. Uh, one thing that I've seen, and maybe it's not a major shift, but something that's maybe happening recently, is people working with large language models like AI, ChatGPT, using that or looking at that like intersection with education. Um, like, I don't know, how are students using ChatGPT in classes? Are they using it in a productive way or an unproductive way? Like, how can we develop our own sort of program of a large language model that only takes in the specific physics concepts of E&M, and how well does that LLM work with education?
Yeah. I'll maybe add to what Justin said. When I think about PER it's still a new field, right? Like it's only been around since what, the 90s. I think that's right. But as I understand the field's shifting, it started with really intentionally looking at intro physics, and how we can teach that, to expand to kind of all areas of physics, like the upper division courses, and really the idea and K-12. And so I've seen that happen. I've also seen a lot more folks interested in equity, and I'm saying a lot more being like zero to like a community of people. So not like a ton more, but there's a lot more studies happening around like queer physicists, which I really like to see. There's a few people who are working on like people with different abilities. Like they're looking at universal design things now. And so there's, I think, pockets of PER happening in really nuanced ways that I think is going to push the field in a way that it should definitely be going.
Yeah, the that stuff I think is really cool. There's and I'm sorry I don't know exactly what it's called, but there's someone who's examining they're looking at how we as PER can change our methodology to be more accessible and inclusive. And there's I really, really wish I knew what it was, but just examining different facets of like an interview and
Mhm.
which aspects are sort of like, yeah, just looking at different aspects of qualitative data collection.
Yeah. Yeah, I did hear about that too, which is also cool. Um, I think it's becoming more reflective and hopefully we'll continue on that path. I think the field would benefit from that.
Great, thanks. So you started getting at some of this, but what are some places or areas that you really hope will emerge in the future with for PER? Anything that you can think of with the scholars, with the research itself?
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll continue because I think I did maybe start talking a bit to that. I'll say that I just am always happy to see more diverse researchers and people who decide to take up PER. I would like to see PER happening in more education spaces, or being presented and community with. One thing about the education field is that it's been around longer. And so there's a lot of things that I think PR folks could learn from people in education and in sociology and those kinds of fields. So I would like to see more of those interdisciplinary, or at least our community interacting with those communities more. And then I would also like to see, of course, being selfish, more of the arts and everything. And so I like this I forget who is doing this work. I think there might be a few people who are, but the ideas of what types of methodologies are valid, I think is kind of something that is valid across all academic fields, right? Like if you're taking qualitative data, a lot of times it's probably an interview or something like this. And so I think a part of decolonize work and work on decolonizing methodologies is talking about what counts as data. And so I like to learn more about that, and I'd like to see more of that in PER as well.
Yeah, something you said, Simone, also sort of sparked in me. A lot of PER work is, or at least in my opinion, is very closely tied to like social studies, looking at social interactions. Um, and those social interactions are tied to identity and recognition and sense of belonging. So there's definitely a lot I think we can learn from other fields, and I'm excited to see how we can collaborate. Um, and also along those lines, like Simone said, PER is still relatively a new field. Like we consider, the subdiscipline of PER compared to physics as a whole, in terms of how long physics has been around, it's still just an infant. And along those lines, PER is growing and continuing to grow. So it's exciting to see how it has evolved and changed throughout time. And it's nowhere near being done.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely not.
Great, and we're getting, so my final question before we start, we have some great questions that are lined up for the Q&A from our audience. So if you have other questions, audience, go for it in the Q&A. My final question though that I came up is, can one get involved with PER if they don't wish to do research?
Hmm.
This is a good question, and I thought about this beforehand, but I don't think I really came up with that good of answers. But here's what I thought of. One is you could participate in studies that PER researchers are doing, right? Like, I don't know, a lot of times people are looking for participants and, you know, looking at particular experiences, your experiences, our experiences are important. So while you may not be, I guess, necessarily doing this research, you could participate in research that can help physics education as a whole. Other things that I thought of, which again I don't think the greatest answers, but you could go to PER seminar talks or read papers on physics education research. If you have a specific discipline within physics that you're interested in, there might be a specific physics education research paper looking at some facet of that subdiscipline of physics. Yeah.
I don't even know if I have much to add. I think those are really the only ways to be involved in research without doing research, is participant or just absorb, like finding out about the data and the findings. Going to a conference maybe, attending AAPT or PER just to learn and meet people, is another way I would say.
Great, well, thank you. And now our first question from the audience is, how does the research methodology change in PER when looking at students in different stages of their education? For instance, the difference between conducting studies in undergraduate versus graduate populations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The methodologies, how did those change? I think analysis methodologies are probably similar, but maybe data collection could change. I know that dealing with young students, like elementary school, is maybe more of a shift in methodological needs than from high school, say, to college or college undergrad to grad. At least when it comes to qualitative methods. I think when it comes to more of like what is being studied, and maybe Justin, you'll have more to say on this, so I'll try and keep it quick. So I know that when we're studying, people who are studying graduate level physics courses are often, I feel like often are thinking about like, I'm losing the word. They're kind of thinking about conceptually how we as physicists conceptualize ideas, like the epistemologies that physicists have. Whereas I see a lot more in the undergraduate side being studies about like how to best teach, like in a classroom or something like this, or classroom structures or curriculums. And maybe that's a difference I've seen. Justin, maybe you say.
No, I think you said most of what there's to be said there. I think the only thing I'd add there, and this isn't necessary, I think it's a little bit methodologically, but also there's two things. One, there's less studies on graduate students as a whole.
Yeah, that's true.
More researchers are interested in either the undergrad or K through 12 experience in terms of PER. It's, I think, something that the field is aware of, and there's some people who may have been or may be looking into it, but it's definitely an area for development. Another thing along those lines is the the population of graduate students, physics graduate students, is much lower than the population of undergraduate students. And so in terms of collecting data, we might have to think a little bit more carefully about the data we collect, because if there are fewer people, it's easier to sort of identify people from data that we collect. So I think we have to be more careful with data privacy of graduate students.
That makes sense with the small n of things. So as we wait for some other questions, how do you see so you heard each other's talks, and I think you're familiar with each other's work. How do you see your work sort of, Justin, your work sort of matching or, supporting Simone's work? And Simone, how do you see your work in Justin's line of research?
A hard question.
That's why they asked me to do these things. They ask the hard questions.
Like, I don't know if I have an answer for that question. Hmm. I guess my work is kind of just around finding ways for Black and brown folks to feel connected with physics, or connected to, like, I'm really passionate about like people realizing that like physics has been in our lives this whole time, and we've been doing it this whole time. It's just not the ways in which the field has recognized. And so in that sense, maybe we're connected that way. Like, I feel like we're both, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'd be connected with any other discipline because as long as it's about physics, there it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I enjoy doing research, but my passion lies with teaching and educating. And so the ultimate goal of my research was to, well, I guess I should say more. I had a really good experience uh, with a computational class. It taught me introductory Python techniques, and that really helped me to visualize like electromagnetic fields in physics. And so I had that really good experience, and I thought, this is great. Everybody should have something like this. And I did more research into like what's the state of computation in physics? Do people want this? How is it being implemented? And what can I do to help other people sort of have this experience and have a good experience? Um,
Mhm.
so I think while our actual research content may not be connected, I think our underlying goal of helping people succeed and learn and thrive in physics is common.
Great. And somebody has asked, do you think there are spaces in our communities, particularly BIPOC communities, that you think we ought to think about as informal learning spaces that people aren't necessarily recognizing as such?
Absolutely. Like, very, very, very much yes. Like, I mean, it is a part of what I'm doing. Like, I think dance is physics. I think it's very few people who could argue with that one. I think even music, what I'm doing right now is learning in the recording studio. I'm doing science. I literally know how to use Logic Pro, this editing software, because I use oscilloscopes. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all the same thing. It's a signal. And so learning about how that signal is created, maybe how it's different from the one when I was using it in the laser lab. But there's some really basic things that we all kind of do, a lot of us do, even in our daily lives, that no one is pointing out that this is actually what we're talking about in physics. And, we're in class, what we're doing is learning a collective language, how to explain these phenomena, but the point is to explain the phenomena, right? And so I think there's so many informal learning spaces that we are not tapping into and could be. Including the ones in the arts, which is where I'm focusing.
I think that was a perfect answer.
I'm like, yeah, you can see that's the one I have like on replay.
Great. And because I want to be mindful of our time, and I have one last question for you all. What are your parting words? What do you want people to remember about physics education research from this talk, from our time together?
Mm. Well, I guess I think I would say that I want people to remember that, like, maybe I'll say the reason PER exists is because people who care about like physics and care about the science felt like we needed better ways of communicating and teaching and bringing people into the community. That was the purpose of at the root. At the root, that was kind of the purpose. And so I do think that is honestly a thing that was easy for me to get on board with because of my own experiences in physics, and imagine that many people here might feel the same. And so it's definitely worth looking into to see what's going on, even if you don't want to pursue it.
Yeah, I think I'd say a similar thing. PER is still growing, and there's lots of facets of PER that can be and are yet to be explored. And so if there's something in your experience in physics that you've seen that you think um, is important or is worth investigating, I'd say check it out. You can see if there's any work being done, or if you're really passionate enough, you can try and do this work yourself. And in general, the PER community is very supportive and helpful. Um, a lot of, like Simone said, a lot of these PR people came from wanting to help um, help people belong and learn physics. So typically open to helping people and joining us.
Great. I think that's a great way to end our time together. Anything else from our folks who helped host this?
Just wanted to thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to present to all of us and to answer all of our questions. We're all really appreciative, and I think it was a really awesome way to start off the series for the year.